The restaurant industry is a massive industry. It's $1 trillion industry. And if you look at wallet share, what is happening, and this had happened pre-COVID. It inverted during COVID, and now it's back to an environment in which, when you look at every dollar that is spent on food, the majority of that dollar is going to the restaurant, right? So consumers are more and more eating out or using restaurants, if you will, as a means to consume food, and less so from a grocery standpoint. So I think it makes the macro maybe increasingly important as you think through that dynamic. One of the things that we've been, I'd say, focused on for a number of quarters now. So maybe going back a little bit further. So part of our revenue model is consumption based. So it's dependent on the number of orders that are being processed over the platform. As you would imagine, during COVID, we had a huge acceleration of the business as digital ordering had really become the only way for consumers to interact, apart from the drive-through, with restaurant brands. And unlike other e-commerce beneficiaries, if you will, from COVID, the restaurant industry has not regressed to the mean. So if you look at digital ordering as a percent of total transactions, it's been pretty stable at about 15% of transactions are digital, which to us, and I think others, reflects the kind of the stickiness, if you will, in terms of the habits that were formed as a result of COVID and food ordering that are here to stay. Now, that I think we have a pretty good handle on in terms of how that's evolved post-COVID. Where we're now turning our attention to is consumer behavior against the backdrop of all of the macro uncertainty that's out there. And in particular, how does that impact food ordering? And we look to kind of that 2007 through 2009 timeframe to say, what can we learn from then that might be applicable to now? And there are a couple things that played out, and some of this I think is probably pretty obvious. The first is consumers tend to trade down, right, when there's economic uncertainty or during inflationary times. So as opposed to going and spending X amount of dollars on a higher priced burger, maybe they go to a lower priced offering. If you look across our customer composition, about 2/3 of our customers would fit that limited service food type, which is that lower priced food type. So to the extent that transition happened, we're somewhat insulated, if you will, from that dynamic, given just our customer composition. The other thing that we saw when you look at the data during the financial crisis is enterprise restaurants tended to benefit both from a sales perspective, but also from a location growth perspective, to some extent at the expense of smaller operators. And the reason for that is, in most cases, enterprise restaurants are well-funded. Many are public or private equity backed. Their access to capital is greater than the sort of average mom and pop restaurant, and it allows them to be a bit more opportunistic as sites become available, et cetera, and their ability to grow. Again, I think that would be, to the extent that dynamic played out, we'd be somewhat insulated from that because of our focus on the enterprise segment. So I'd say those are the things we're looking at now, is like kind of those macro trends, what's happening with the consumer and their ordering behavior, and then how does that ultimately flow through to the YOLO model, et cetera, and less around kind of like the COVID dynamics, which I think have been all normalized by now.